Well, good evening, everybody. I'm sure most of you know that I'm Warwick Henry, the President of AHSA Queensland, and our esteemed Secretary Peter Dunn, OAM, will, as usual, running the cameras, mics, etc., in the Zoom session. Plus, tonight he'll be doing a main presentation as well. I've got local members here, of course, plus country and interstate members joining by Zoom, and others can watch later from the YouTube recording. Our outing to Amberley Aviation Heritage Centre a couple of weeks ago, Thursday, 10th of August, went very well. And AHSA member Daryl Purdom, who works there, was guide for us, and he's here tonight. The exhibits there are first class. And coming up, here's a sample shown by these pictures taken by Peter Dunn at the Amberley Aviation Heritage Centre.
So that's us leading the bus parked out the front there. A few people I can see in the photo are here tonight. That was our guide, young Daryl. Thank you very much. Young Daryl, yes, with the
version
with the golden hair.
silver.
I took a photo of his name tag up the top there, at the top left. There's the crowd. How many did we have?
26.
26 people. So they had a reasonable turnout. So this is a video display that Daryl put on, and a bit of smoke and fancy lights going off and on. It was quite good actually. So there's a F-111 module outside the Korean hangar. There's Dennis Baker there, second from the right. He's not very well at the moment. He was due to speak tonight, so I hope he's getting better. This is the Sabre that hit I think it was an 11 kV line. Yeah, going to Binnaburra. And you can see the gouge mark here, and one of it's a 19.083 copper conductor. I know because I worked in the industry, and it broke the canopy. Hit his helmet, damaged the helmet. Lucky he didn't lose his head. And you can, I think in a later photo, you'll see there's a bit of the copper conductor. In a later photo there, you'll see this photo here, you can see where it went into the tail fin up the top there.
Many people pick it out, but on the tailpipe there, somebody's tagged it. It says, in a yellow stencil, you can't read it, but it says light touch paper and retire.
There's that nice aircraft, the Lockheed 10. Beautiful thing. That top bit at the top right there is on the tail. And we had a very pleasant country meal at the Hagesley Sundowner Saloon. So all in all, it was a good day.
Yes, certainly was.
Well done to Warwick. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The inaugural Pacific Air Show Gold Coast at Service Paradise last Friday, Saturday and Sunday. Very, very good too. I know of at least 3 of our members who were there with me. I'm sure there were plenty of others from AHSA there and various other crowds. Janice Anderson and Mary Van Hummel were there that I know of. Here are some photographs I took. First, the Yak 110. Why that name? Well, they started with 2 Yak 55s and joined them together and added a jet engine. It can really perform.
Jet engine there.
It did quite a lot of stuff. And
Did a maneuver I'd never seen before, falling flat plane out of the sky, tumbling perfectly. So it was falling tail first at one stage, nose first, tail first, as it was rotating.
yeah, we kept one engine going, the other one not.
Yeah. Wasn't it flat spin? It was like
Yeah,
vertical.
it was great. There are too many to show all the ones I took, and of course I took a lot, but just got 4 to show tonight. But among the other most interesting parts was US Marine Corps Bell Boeing MV-22 Osprey here doing its party tricks. It's quite fantastic machine. It's quite a bulky fuselage. It can take big loads. It's operated by the Marines normally. It can't take off with the propellers, engines horizontal, because the propellers will be in the ground. You can take off with the propellers about 45 degrees tilted and use a runway if they want to, but ordinarily they usually take off vertically. And then it rotates the propellers to the front and away it goes.
Each one of those blades is, I was up at the Brisbane Valley Air Show and talked to the Marines up there because they had one up at Brisbane Valley. Each one of those blades is $500,000.
I'm surprised. They also fold up very compactly.
Yeah.
You stop the engines, you fold all three blades in, and then that makes it pretty compact there. And then the whole wing structure rotates 90 degrees. So the wing and engines are fore and aft, and the engines are then horizontal. And you can therefore make it into a small, relatively small space. Another unusual one, the Fuckwolf 190 replica. First time I've seen it flying, I thought I was going to see it flying down at Haas some years ago, and it was unserviceable. But it's a great machine. And for this little trip, USAF C-17, chasing a KC-135 tanker. And so tonight we were expecting to have Dave, as Peter has mentioned, Dennis Baker of AHSA was going to tell us about the Barracks sonar buoy. Now we couldn't make it today, so we'll have him another time, we hope. Hope he'll recover soon. So we've had a late change of speaker, and the topic tonight will now be Peter Dunn is going to give us a history of Archerfield Airport since its inception in about 1930, 31. I'm sure Peter will give me the exact date for that. Just before Peter takes over, future guest speakers, next meeting, 29th of September, our member Tony Arbon. We're talking about the history and development of Australian air data from manual records to the website. I've got quite a few of his publications on aircraft registrations, etc. in Australia. In October, Anthony Cooper will be our guest speaker, but I don't yet know what his topic's going to be. And in November, Peter Dornan will talk about Nicky Barr, an Australian air ace. So remember, if you've got an aviation story to tell, let us know. We're always after you. Now to our main event tonight, I'll hand over to Peter Dunn. Over to you, Peter.
Thank you. My talk tonight, Archfield at War. Someone reminded me that I did give this talk many, many years ago when we used to meet in the Royal Queensland Aero Club building. So Archfield Airport is on Commonwealth government land. It's operated under the Australian Airports Act of 1996. And Gavin and Karen Bird have held that 99-year lease since the 19th of June, 1998. The airport was named Australia's Metropolitan Airport of the Year for 2021 by the Australian Airports Association. And as you know, it's currently Brisbane's secondary airport, used to be its primary airport. And I'll talk about that shortly. That's just the layout. We're here where that arrow points to. I won't sort of go into too much detail there. They've done a lot of work in the last year or two out there with lighting and runways and tarmacs, etc. Archfield carries the largest number of general aviation movements of all Queensland airports, with approximately 140,000 movements per year. Has the most aviation operators and flying schools of any airfield in Queensland, and it's home to over 200 aircraft. It's got a multi-runway configuration comprising 2 parallel runways in 2 different directions. Main runway 28R/10 left, and its supporting taxiways are both equipped with pilot-activated lighting to aid nighttime flying. And the 0422 crosswind parallel runways and taxiways have sealed runway thresholds. Let's go back to the start. So in 1927, Captain Lester Brain, you probably remember that name. He was the chief flying instructor for Qantas at the time, landed his DH-61 on Franklin's Farm over that way somewhere on the western side of today's Archfield Airfield to see if he could find a site for an airfield for the Commonwealth government. The government eventually, he said it was a good site. Government eventually acquired about 300 acres in 1929, and they purchased more land in 1930, 1936, 1942, and finally bought God's Acre, the cemetery out the front there, in 1946. bring it to a total of 825 acres. The airfield started its operations on the 1st of April 1931. So it took over from Eagle Farm Airfield, which started on the 1st of April 1925. I'm not sure what the 1st of April, why both of them opened on the 1st of April. The Queensland Aero Club was established in 1919. I don't know if I've got that right. Someone might correct. It's correct. Thank you.
Yeah.
And moved from Eagle Farm to Archfield in 1931. The government agreed to provide about 5 acres at the northern end of the airfield area at Peppercorn Rental to allow building of a RQAC clubhouse. So Hangar 1 was the original government hangar from Eagle Farm. It was built at Eagle Farm in 1925. They closed Eagle Farm down because when it rained, it was too boggy. The aircraft used to bog when it rained. So Hangar 1 was relocated here, re-erected at Archfield in April 1931. So I think I believe it's that bit there as the original bit. During the war, they extended it to the east towards the main road out here by the Department of Air Production, DAP, on the 2nd. That's a photo taken on the 2nd of July. And it was going to be occupied by ANA during the war. I took that photo quite a few years ago. It's had a new coat of paint since then. But that's the original government hangar from Eagle Farm Airfield. It's the last hangar on the row of hangars out the front here. A couple of old photos. Kingswood Smith with his Southern Cross Junior. You can see Royal Queensland Aero Club on the front there. A couple of tigers. Hangar 4. It's not there anymore. But it was moved from Eagle Farm. It was the original Qantas hangar. Okay, Hangar 4, originally at Eagle Farm, built in 1927, I think. 1927, and relocated to here in June 1931, and became Qantas's Hangar number 1. Hangar number 2 was this one here, which is Hangar 5. So this hangar used to be at Eagle Farm. That's where it used to be. Okay, they got pulled down. So that was demolished in February 2021. So there's the 2 hangars, Hangar 4 and 5. And Hangar 5 was the first hangar built here in 1930 and became Hangar number 2, as I said earlier. So as you can see, it's quite short there, but during the war, they extended it again to the east, to that main road out the front. That was announced in July 1941, that they were going to double the size of Hangar number 5 to cope with the war work that they were doing for the RAF. Here's a little story that I found in August 1932. There was some maniac driving around in a car out on the tarmac out here in front of the hangars. And he had a kid in the back seat, I think it was. And he was driving very recklessly. He drove at speed amongst the aircraft outside the 2 Qantas hangars at about 2:30 p.m. on the 13th of August. He had his 6-year-old daughter in the car. Heaven knows what he was doing, but he hit 2 aircraft and went through 3 fences with his 6-year-old daughter in the back. Mr. Gardner, the Royal Queensland Aero Club instructor, threw a joystick at him, thought that might stop him, but clearly it didn't. And then Air Commodore Sir Charles Kingswood Smith stood by with his rifle that he grabbed as the car drove towards the Southern Cross, which he didn't want the car to hit. The car then left the airfield with 3 cars in pursuit, one of them with Kingswood Smith in it, and he fired 2 shots at the tyres of that erratic car, which eventually stopped and the driver was apprehended. So quite a funny little story that I found involving Sir Charles Kingswood Smith. Okay, so that's the plan that was originally approved to build I think 3 terminal buildings, one at Archerfield, one in Sydney and one here. And that was the idea, but they left those bits out for this building. Must have been a cutback, run out of money or something. So those, if you look outside, the building does a little step up at that location. You can see it there. So that bit's missing. So that's a photo in April 1955. You notice all the big aerials everywhere and the old control tower on the top. Completed in 1941, just in time for the Pacific War. And that's what it looked like during the war. They built, see the Splinter Proof surround that they built with timber, and then there's probably sandbags in between two rows of parallel rows of timber to prevent shrapnel, coming through into this building. And they camouflaged it, as you can see as well. And that's taken from our side. That other one was from the other side. So I don't know what year that was, but it's clearly during the war, later in the war, because the Splinter Proof wall has disappeared. Okay, in November 1941, late November 1941, Major General Brereton turned up in his B-17D from the Philippines and parked his B-17 just out here. We're in that building at the moment. And he was here to have some high-level talks down in Melbourne with the War Department and senior RAF officers about some American projects that they wanted to kick off to build airfields and a large air depot, because they knew something was going to happen with the Japanese. Remember, this is just before Pearl Harbor, a couple of weeks. So they were here for top secret meetings. They were told that B-17 he couldn't take south because the airfields down there weren't big enough, wouldn't take the weight of his aircraft, which I think is a lot of rubbish. But he believed him, so he left it behind and flew south in his party flew south in a B-18 Bolo and a Lockheed Hudson. It was so secret they were all dressed in civvies too, by the way. They weren't in uniform. So this happened about 2 weeks before the attack on Pearl Harbor. That's the same aircraft taken from the other direction. And you can see Camp Archfield over in the background here, where 23 Squadron had their barracks. So that's just out here. And you can tell it's an early war photo because they've still got the red ball in the middle of the insignia, which got removed in about April, May 42, because people kept seeing that as a Japanese insignia and misidentifying Allied aircraft, and quite a few were shot at by anti-aircraft guns and fighter aircraft. So they painted them out. Okay, after Pearl Harbor on the 7th of December, was the 8th of December here, the Hudsons and Wirraways at Archfield were placed on alert. Not that they could do too much with a Wirraway and a Hudson. And as I said earlier, they erected that bomb-proof or splinter-proof wall around the outside in February 42. And they set up dispersal areas around the airfield to disperse the aircraft in case of any possible bombing raids. And the main two were near Oxley Creek, over near where the Speedway is or was. And the other one was the corner of Bow Desert Road and Mortimer Road. So you can see all the, there were 5 in total. So we're here somewhere, just about here. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 dispersal areas with taxiways, so they could put them in amongst the trees, etc., to hide them. So I'm going to talk about all the different Air Force units that were based here during the war. So there was obviously the Royal Australian Air Force. There was the United States Army Air Forces. Some people incorrectly say United States Army Air Corps. That disappeared before the war. Even the US Army Air Force couldn't get it right sometimes. They kept calling it USAAC. The US Navy were here, out this way, and I'll show you where they were. The Netherlands East Indies Air Force were here. The British Air Force, the RAF, Royal Air Force, were here. And the British Navy, the British Pacific Fleet or Royal Navy Fleet Air Arm were here as well. They were mostly over the other side here at those hangars over there. Plus, obviously, a number of civilian organisations, including Qantas and ANA. You've seen that plane. It's on the wall as you walk in the war room there, blown up on the wall. It's a plan that was given to me by somebody years ago and drawn up by Corporal Philip Leonard. I haven't really been able to find him in the records for some reason, so maybe his name's not quite right. But it's quite an interesting diagram, and I've used a couple of excerpts from that in a couple of the future slides. So it's an aerial photo. I think this is a 1946 aerial photo. So, so this is Kerry Road. So these are the hangars that the British Navy used. I'll talk about these barracks here a bit later on. There's Camp Archfield, which was 23 Squadron. There was a radio site here. All this area in here amongst all the bushes was a big American Air Force camp called Camp Muckley. And up here was another radio receiver site, which I'll talk about shortly on the other side of Bow Desert Road. I'll talk about that quarry at the end of my talk as well. It's full of World War II stuff. I've got some photos. I do have videos, but I'm not going to show them tonight. So here's that radio site on the other side of Bow Desert Road, sort of intersection of Bow Desert Road, Boundary Road. I found a photo of that building there years ago, and I didn't realise where it was until I did a little bit more investigating, and then I worked out it's this location. So there's those Royal Navy hangars. So this was the 419th Signal Company. They set up a system for using connecting teletype machines to radio links, which had never been done before. Typically they were landline connected. So these two guys developed that here in Brisbane. So there's that photo I originally had, and you can see the timber poles that have the rhombic aerials on them. So they'd string them with insulators, and they were in the shape of a diamond, directional. There probably would have been 4 or 5 big antennas to talk to different locations. So Sergeant James Reynolds and Staff Sergeant Jack Maidlow of the 8th Fighter Group, so it's a US Army Air Force group, develop a system to connect teletype machines to radio links. So these radio links were transoceanic links. They could do a single hop to San Francisco with these links, so quite powerful. So they used Crammond radios in Brisbane to help manufacture the design that they came up with, and they made 12 of those units. And the first unit was installed here at Archfield by that unit. A few other radio type things. Radio station VZBN operated out of here by Air Radio. There was a radio direction finding station somewhere nearby. I don't know the location, but it would have been within 5 kilometres of here. And there was a big tower over here somewhere, the Lorenz beam receiver signal tower for homing in on Archfield. There were also a number of heavy anti-aircraft guns. So there was 2 3-inch guns that came from Amberley. They were originally at one stage going to put 4 3.7-inch heavy anti-aircraft guns here, but that didn't go ahead, and they just put the 2 3-inch guns from Amberley. There was also a single Bofors gun, 40mm on that corner there. And I was contacted by one of these guys many years ago, and he gave me these photos of that gun located down the road down here. There were lots of American anti-aircraft guns around here. I won't go into the detail, but they were here only for a short period, from April through till June by the looks of it, 1st of June. The 104th Coast Artillery Battalion relocated to Cooktown. Some units came here for a short time from Amberley, and some from Petrie Airfield as well. Okay, 23 Squadron. I'll go through each of the Air Force units. 23 Squadron moved from Richlands to Archfield on 30th of August 1939. This is when the war was on in Europe. They operated 4 Ansons and 3 Tiger Moths initially, and they were the first RAF unit here at Archfield. And they were operating Wirraways by late March 1940, and then received the first 3 Lockheed Hudsons on the 6th of August 1940. On the 24th of March 1942, so this is after Pearl Harbor and war had broken out in the Pacific, a Wirraway based here from 23 Squadrons attacked a presumed Japanese submarine 45 miles off Stradbroke Island and dropped 2 100-pound bombs, probably on a poor unsuspecting whale. But could have been a Japanese sub because there were quite a lot of them operating off our east coast, and there were quite a few ships sunk and quite a few ships badly damaged by Japanese submarines. So that unit moved to Beanley, that's 23 Squadron, on the 6th of May 1942. Just a couple of photos, that's their band, the old Anson. So there's that Camp Archfield. We'll talk about that quarry a bit later. Camp Muckley is up off the top of the screen. And this is an American barracks just here that I'll talk about shortly. Passing out parade, I think that's 23 Squadron, having a passing out parade. Another RAF unit that was here was 2 Elementary Flying Training School. Initially, it was called 3 Elementary Flying Training School, and it changed their name in January 1940 for some reason. And their first course started on the 27th of December 1939. They got 15 Tiger Moths arrived from Richmond in January 40, and they were housed and operated from civilian hangars, probably these ones along here, till the construction of the 2 Bellman hangars over that way. On the 13th of July 1940, the following Royal Queensland Aero Club aircraft were commandeered for the RAF, and you can see all the ones that are listed there. So on 31st of January 1940, 2 EFTS comprised 18 officers and 87 airmen, and 1 Royal Queensland Aero Club instructor, and another instructor joined a bit later. And they had 26 officers, cadets under instruction. Cyril Broom, the chief flying instructor for the Royal Queensland Aero Club, was one of the 2 civilian instructors, and they taught theory of flight, navigation, cipher, and looked after the unit technical library. The unit used the relief landing ground at Logan White, and I'll show you where they are shortly, and the emergency landing ground at Runcorn that I used to live on once. The Royal Queensland Aero Club also carried out maintenance for the unit, and that unit was eventually disbanded pretty early in the war on the 31st of March 1942. Not sure of the reason for that. That unit had a lot of accidents. This is slide 1 of the accidents. So these are accidents only for this unit. There were many, many other accidents out here. Many aircraft crashes out here in front of here and within 10 kilometres of here. But these are the ones for this unit. That's the second page. I'm not going to go into all the detail, but just to point out that there were quite a lot of accidents. You've probably seen that name board in the war room here. It's, if you do a hard left in that little war room, it's up the end there on the left-hand wall. This location became an official RAF station on the 17th of June 1940, and when most of the units had moved to Beanley, it got disbanded in 1st of July 1942. 76 Squadron, another squadron, it was actually formed here on the 14th of March 42, was equipped with P-40E Kitty Hawks, and they transferred to the Aikenvale Weir Airfield in Townsville on the 16th of April 1942. That runway became a local road after the war. We used to drive over the old airfield quite often when I was up in Townsville. Number 4 communication flight. There's another unit that was based here, formed on the 7th of September 42. They started with those aircraft there, 4 aircraft. And by the end of January 43, they obtained some additional aircraft. As you can see, quite a mixture of types of aircraft. Wirraways, One Beaufort, Hudson, Tigers, Ansons, etc. Later on, they operated some more different types of aircraft. A Douglas Dolphin, Moth Minor, even a Volti Vengeance, etc. So I'm not quite sure why all the different types. They might have got all the dregs. So the unit was involved in ferrying passengers and the occasional aircraft around Australia and New Zealand. So people like General Blamey and senior public servants and the occasional senior overseas visiting officers were transported around Australia and up to New Guinea by this number 4 communication flight. Some of their other activities were target towing, photographic missions, communication and cooperation flights with Army and Navy, ferrying parts, safe hand mail delivery, and the occasional medical evacuation. It was renamed to slightly different name on the 1st of November 43. The Duke of Gloucester visited here on the 15th, 16th of February 45 and headed south in one of the unit's Lodestars. And the unit was disbanded after the war on the 16th of April 1946. So another unit was 2 Air Ambulance Unit. Their headquarters moved from Kingaroy Airfield to Archfield on the 7th of September 44. So they became a lodge unit with number 4 communications unit. So they lived in their barracks and they ate in their mess and all that sort of stuff. They also had small detachments at Townsville and Corona Downs. And in September 44, the unit had 15 officers and 131 airmen on the strength. So there are quite a lot of service personnel based here during the war. That's the aircraft they had. Again, a bit of a mixture. 6 Dragons was the most popular one. And later on in July 45, when the war was about to finish, they got 4 C-47 Dakotas. And then the unit was disbanded then early the next year after the war had finished. That's the Tugan Gannet that they had as an ambulance aircraft. And could carry 2 stretcher cases. Originally, prior to that, used as a survey flight aircraft. We've seen this photo in our newsletter a few times after I showed it at a previous meeting where Ian McDonald did a lot of research on tiger moths that were used as air ambulances. And there's the stretcher in the back of A17-450. There's one of their new C-47 Dakotas in the background there at Archfield. Righto, 38 Squadron. Fredo mentioned this squadron the other night in his talk on Wednesday night. So they moved to Archfield from Richmond on the 27th of December, 1944. They flew operational transport missions to New Guinea, and casualty evacuation operations were increased in 1945. And when the Japanese surrendered on the 15th of August, they were the first to fly into Singapore to evacuate POWs from Bangkok, Singapore, and Borneo. There was a fairly tragic crash that just over there, about probably 2 kilometres, on the 27th of March, 1943. And all 23 occupants were killed in that crash. And it's still Australia's 10th worst air tragedy to this day. There were some ladies as well involved in that, some WAF ladies. There's a plaque inside the war room to commemorate that event. So here's some of these. I mentioned the Logan Lee Relief Landing Ground. So you can see Griffith University College, and that's the Logan Motorway just there, and Logan Lee Road, Logan Institute at TAFE. So there were 2 runways there. Runcorn was just a big open paddock, just an emergency landing ground. I used to live here in Monarda Street, and across the road from me was the manager of the Broncos, and up the road from me in that street at the cul-de-sac was Cooper Cronk as a kid. living in our street. He's quite a well-known footballer. You can see part of Bradford Kendall here, these buildings here, and Bradford Kendall got established here. These buildings were built by the Americans, used by the quartermaster, used for stores, and it was taken over by the British Royal Navy as a store area early 1945. Beanley was an emergency landing ground, again just a big open paddock called Herbst Paddock, owned by the Herbst family, and that's now Mount Warren Park. So that's a 1944 photo. Three other airfields at Kingston, A10, A11 and A12, which is off the bottom of the screen. So it's the A11 at the top, A10 in the middle. This is the A10, which is near that Kingston Park Raceway, the go-kart track. It's Chambers Flat Road there. Another one is A11. So that's near Cara Forest. There's the Waterford Airfield, another airfield. There were about half a dozen out Logan White during the war. So that's where Waterford West Primary School is today. And there was another one out this way at Gales, was an emergency landing ground. You can see it here, and that's the railway line and the road to Toowoomba just over here. Okay, so that's the RAAF. So this now we're starting with the US Army Air Forces. When the Pensacola convoy arrived here on the 22nd of December 1941, after being diverted from the Philippines, going to the Philippines, they had a lot of crated aircraft which were unloaded and brought here for assembly and test flying, etc. So there's one of the war hawks, as they call them. We call them kitty hawks, being made ready to be assembled for the 49th Fighter Group. There's one getting pretty close to being ready. There's a Dauntless here at Archfield being assembled. This quote here is from a very large document that you can download off the National Archives website, giving you airfield data. There's lots of information. I just grabbed this little sentence here to describe Archfield Airfield. An all-over field, so it was all over grass. Okay, there were no concrete or bitumen runways, so no runways or strips with runs up to 6,000 feet. Aircraft do not bog, but do have a tendency to slide on greasy surfaces during and after heavy rain. And I'll give you a little story about one of those incidents. So on the 25th of March, 1942, 4 B26 Marauders, a twin-engined type aircraft of the 22nd Bomb Group, arrived here. They had flown in from the USA, Highland topping. Two of them, so they must have come in from this direction, from the southwest, heading northeast. And two of them skidded on the wet grass out the front here. And one slammed into a B-25 Mitchell bomber. Another crashed into the tail of a DC-3. And then it went through the boundary fence out the front here on Beatty Road. And then it went through and crossed the road through another fence on the other side of the road. And then it skidded into that house there. So you can see the skid marks. You can see Boundary Road here, and there's a B-25 sitting over there in the top of the photo. So that's a B-26 Marauder parked into the kitchen, I think, of a house that used to be down over here somewhere. I threw this in. This is a photo out of the book that the 81st Air Depot Group put out. They were the main unit based at Eagle Farm Airfield, but they did have a repair section based here at excuse me, at Archfield during World War II. You can see the nose of the B24 Liberator being repaired there. Okay, Air Transport Command. On the 4th of February, 42, US USAFIA headquarters of Air Transport Command and its aircraft arrived here from Amberley with Captain Pappy Gunn, who's quite a famous, well-known character from World War II in Queensland. He was the former manager of the Philippine Airlines. He was placed in command of Air Transport Command here at Archfield. And at that time, they had those aircraft that you see listed there, 3 Bolos, 3 Liberators, etc., 1 B-17 and a Sky Trooper. So there's a Commando, C-46. So one of the units in Air Transport Command was the 21st Troop Carrier Squadron. They were actually activated. They started here on the 3rd of April, 1942, and they changed their name to 21st Troop Carrier Squadron on the 26th of July, 42, and began flying the Commandos and the Sky Train, the Dakota, we call them. So they were living at Camp Muckley down here in the bush in this camp. And you can see in this photo at the left here, they've got outdoor ablutions, etc. But they moved from there to their new barracks that were built here that you can just see. So that's at Camp Muckley. It was a replacement depot. It's like a holding pot for when people came in, they held them there until they worked out which unit they'd get sent to. In the RAF, we had called them from the base pools. So there's their new camp. So they relocated to that on the 22nd of February 1943. Notice all the buildings over the road, just over here, that were there during the war. And that big sawtooth hangar, which I'll talk about a bit later, that was just here. So this Wirraway pilot, as he was landing, thought he might just take a photo, which is a good photo of the 39th Troop Carrier Squadron barracks. There were gliders that operated from here for a short while as an experiment. So that's a CG-4A glider being loaded up. He's capable of carrying 3,800 pounds of freight. They weren't very successful. They did try to tow some up to New Guinea, and I think 3 of them crashed on the way. 39th Troop Carrier Squadron was responsible for transport traffic within Australia and up to Port Moresby. They remained here for 8 months under the command of the the Directorate of Air Transport, and then relocated to Port Moresby on the 28th of September, 1943. Just a general photo of a Liberator parked out here and a Bolo, B-18 Bolo, ugly looking thing. There's one of those Marauders again, like the one that crashed into that house in a P-40 Warhawk in the background. There's a Expediter, C-45, not a very well-known aircraft, Beechcraft, and some other aircraft in the background. So another one of the American units that was here was the 15th Weather Squadron. Pretty well every airfield in Australia had a detachment of this squadron to help all the local squadrons with weather information. So they were based here, and you can see they operated out of this building just here, which is a building that was out there somewhere. And you can see US Navy 7th Command Fleet, which I'll talk about shortly. So MacArthur, who was based in the AMP building for just over from July 42 till October 43. He was there for just over 2 years. He used to park his B-17 just out here, out the end of the building. So that his private aircraft was here for over 2 years. That's a photo at Nadzab, not here, but that is Bataan, that's his aircraft. So it was modified internally. I think the bomb bay doors was welded shut or whatever, and all these seats were inserted, etc. So there's MacArthur with about to give General George C. Kenny a Distinguished Service Medal at Archfield, again just out the end of the building here, and that's General Kenny's private B-17 called Sally, which was named after the wife of one of his crew members. So it was here for over 2 years as well. There's MacArthur arriving here at Archfield, talking to his driver, Sergeant Clarence Hensley. And there's the General's wife, Jean MacArthur. The General sent her out to welcome the President's wife, Mrs. Eleanor Roosevelt, to Brisbane. So she probably walked through here, Eleanor Roosevelt. And that's the General's wife's, Jean's car USA 2 in the background there. So the general had USA 1. So that was the 13th of September 1943. So the US Navy, as I mentioned earlier, their 7th Command Fleet were operating out of this area and parked some of their aircraft just in that area. Their official title was Aircraft 7th Fleet Flag Utility Towing Unit. Quite a mouthful. And they had a Grumman Avenger, 2 Douglas Dauntless, and 1 Grumman Duck. And they provided utility services for 6 flag aircraft. The unit transferred to Detachment A, Marine Utility Squadron 2 on the 22nd of August, 44. In October 44, they were doing tracking and tow flights off Wellington Point. At Wellington Point, there was an anti-aircraft gunnery school. So they would take off from here with a big rope, I don't know how long, 500 metres or whatever long, with a target on the end. And they'd fly in front of these anti-aircraft guns that would fire live ammunition from Wellington Point at them. So they were pretty game. So that unit moved to St Tani Airfield in Hollandia on the 16th of November 1944. So these are some of the hangars across the road on that southern side of Kerry Road. So you can see they're even using it before it was finished being built. They're still putting the roof on, and there's a B24, this one, parked inside that they're working on. So that's hangar number 1, initially occupied by Qantas, later by the British Fleet Air Arm. So there's that corrugated roof hangar that I talked about just there. We're here, so it's just out there somewhere. That got relocated to Eagle Farm after the war in 1948. It's no longer there, of course. The Bellman hangars, operated by A&A as a sheet metal shop, that one there, and then a airframe repair shop, the one on the bottom right. Another photo, the airframe repair shop with a Liberator B24 in it. These are buildings, the garage and canteen across the other side of Kerry Road. That photo is taken from hangar 2, and there's the Department of Air Production canteen on the other side of Beatty Road, erected for A&A. This is a good one. I found this, I think, in Trove. So there used to be a tuck shop here. Don't know where it was, but they sold hot pies. And one of the statements here by a warrant officer says, I was an aircraftsman grade 1 or whatever it was in the Air Force until I took a course of your wonderful hot pies. Now I'm a warrant officer and rising fast because of the hot pies. So Miss Wood's tuck shop. Okay, Netherlands East Indies Air Force. So when the Dutch escaped out of Java, Netherlands East Indies, when the Japanese attacked in early 42, a number of Dutch airmen and aircraft came to here and to Melbourne. Lieutenant Van Ridgen and a party of Netherlands East Indies personnel flew from here in a B-25 on the 1st of April 1942, there's that date again, to arrange the formation and location of a new Dutch squadron. Other Dutch personnel arrived in Canberra from Melbourne, and they formed the 18th NEI Squadron. So it was under RAF control and had RAF personnel in it as well, but it was mostly Dutch personnel. So it was formed as a RAF squadron at Fairbairn in Canberra on the 4th of April 42, and Ridgen was their acting commanding officer. In December 42, they relocated to McDonald Airfield in the Northern Territory, and then relocated to Java in January 46 after the war. The Netherlands East Indies had a transport unit operating from here called NEI Transport Section Brisbane. They had 3 Lockheed Lodestars and 5 B-25 Mitchell bombers, and they would ferry personnel and materials to their 2 Dutch squadrons, one being 120 Squadron in Marorki and 18 Squadron at McDonald Airfield in the Northern Territory. There was a similar unit called NEI Transport Section Melbourne, and they were later combined with the Brisbane one to become number 1 NEI Transport Squadron in November 1944. And on the 15th of August, they changed to become 19 NEI Transport Squadron under RAF control, and they had 13 Dakotas based here at Archerfield. Okay, so that's the Dutch. Now the British. So they relocated to Archerfield on the 1st of May 45. I'm talking about 1315 Transport Flight, Royal Air Force. They were a transport unit delivering personnel, messages and equipment, and they eventually started to return to England on the 2nd of March 1946, and you'll find that plaque again inside the war room there. Another Royal Air Force unit that was here was called a staging post, 194 staging post. Came here in July 45. They used Camp Muckley over in the bush over there, the former US Army Air Forces camp, as their barracks, and they were responsible for delivery of mail to British locations in the Pacific as far away as Singapore and Hong Kong, and they brought back POWs and servicemen and women at the end of the war. They were eventually disbanded here in February 1946. Okay, British Navy, British Royal Navy Fleet Air Arm. So they arrived here early 45. The war in Europe was pretty much over. Tammy 1, which was called, they were given ships' names, the units, was HMS Nabsford. So Tammy 1 is Transportable Aircraft Maintenance Yard number 1. The advance party arrived here in February 45, so the war hadn't finished in Europe yet. And they were supplemented by 80 hands or personnel on loan from HMS Golden Hind, which I think was in the racecourse in Sydney, and an additional number 1 special maintenance party as well. They were known as the Corsair Technical Party, and they were originally tasked with erecting 16 Corsair Mark IV aircraft at Kerry Road in those hangars across the road. 12 Corsairs were almost completed by the time the main body of Tammy 1 arrived on the 27th of March 45, and they went along to also assemble Hellcats, Avengers and Seafires in those hangars across the road. So the Seafire looks a little bit like a Spitfire. Tammy 1 was disbanded at Archfield on the 31st of March 46. And when they were here for the duration, they were their barracks were the Royal Navy camp at Rockley, just off Evans Road, that was originally built for the ammunition depot. But by the time the camp was built, it was built for about 3,000 people, by the way. By the time it was built, the ammo depot closed down. So the British Navy took it over. So there it is there. That's just above Muriel Avenue. There's Evans Road, and the ammo depot was off to the east, to the right, along Evans Road. There's the former GEC. That's all gone now. But that's quite a big camp, as you can see. It got the nickname the Pommy Camp during the war. So another unit was Monab's 7, which was given the ship name Nabriki, HMS Nabriki. So Monab stood for Mobile Naval Air Base. They arrived by train around about the 8th of August 45, just before the war finished, and went to the Pommy Camp. They also took over Camp Meander near Eagle Farm Airfield, which is that originally US Army stores. After the war, it became an Australian Army stores depot, and now it's a quarantine, was rebuilt as a quarantine station for the COVID pandemic. And they're trying to work out how to use it at the moment. So they also took that over. 300 ratings started working at Kerry Road across the road alongside the personnel of Tammy 1 on the 10th of August 45, a few days before the war finished. And they supplemented an existing annex of Tammy 1, which had been at Oakey, erecting Seafire aircraft for some time. Okay, nearly finished. The quarry. That quarry started, I think, in the 1920s. It was started to get ballast for the interstate railway line. And there was another quarry, I think, in New South Wales. But after a while, they struck a spring and it filled up with water. So the quarry got abandoned. In fact, when they drained this quarry, later on, some of the original trolleys that they used in the quarry were still down the bottom there. So during the war and after the war, lots of stuff was dumped in that quarry. I've heard lots of stories of kids in the 50s diving in there and bringing up Thompson submachine guns. I've actually seen a Thompson submachine gun that was recovered from there when they drained that place a number of years ago. It was gas axed, it had a hole blown in it, but it came out of that quarry. As you can see, look, 50 caliber machine guns. These are photos that I took. They all came out of that quarry. Some of them weren't gas axed, some of them were complete. They weren't damaged. Lots of engine support frames, gun turret. I think that's the Japanese trench mortar. Just a general view of the quarry. Is that what it is? Yep. Okay. And more stuff here, and that's dangerous stuff. So a bloke called Terry Kelly got permission from the council to drain it. And it was quite an event. I used to come down nearly every second day and take photos and videos. So I've got videos of it all as well. But he brought a hell of a lot of stuff out. And a lot of dangerous stuff started to come out as well. And they eventually shut it down. He was finding drums of 44-gallon drums that were tarred off. And the rumour was that after the atomic tests, there were Lincolns or something that flew through the dust cloud. They were parked here and decontaminated and stuck in drums and into that.
The unit history books say those drums were dropped by other Lincolns
off the coast. Yeah. Anyway, he was bringing up lots of ordnance as well, and the army were being called there quite often, and it was eventually shut down. And a lot of the stuff that he brought up, including a lot of these 50 calibers, was confiscated. But some of it wasn't. You know, as I say, I saw one of the Thompson submachine guns, Major Bill Benson, who used to work in MacArthur's headquarters. When I visited his place once, he showed me the Pommy gun that he'd mounted above a doorway that came out of that hole. So all the stories are true. There were lots of aircraft parts, bits of wings, bits of tails, wheels. Yeah, there were wheels. You can see the wheel there. But in reality, he was only finding the stuff on the top. That would have silted quite a distance, I would say, over the, since 1940. And there'd be a lot of more interesting stuff down below, but of course it's probably rusty as anything, but yeah, quite an interesting place. So that was 1992. And Terry Kelly was the guy. He's since deceased. And that's the end of my talk. Any questions?
So Archerfield Aerodrome was still had no sealed runways until after the war, apparently.
Yeah, that's right. Yep.
It's an all over field.
Yep.
Question?
Just to start it off, you mentioned the American 21st Transport Squadron formed here in April 42. There was a big function out at Beanley last year.
Okay.
On their 50th anniversary of the formation of the 21st and 23rd.
The American units.
The American units.
Okay.
But unfortunately, the 21st didn't come. They were flying C-17s and they had been deployed or they were working very hard in Poland or thereabouts and didn't make it. But the 23rd did come. Right. They bought a C5.
Oh,
It was a pretty good party.
Yeah, I've been in touch. I can't remember which squadron. I've got a lot of web pages. I've got over 6,000 web pages. And one of the Raptor pilots who was here in Australia contacted me. He was writing a history on his particular squadron. And that was quite interesting to be getting an email from a Raptor pilot. Question down the back here.
Go ahead. You mentioned the wartime airstrip at the weir in Townsville. Which weir? The 1, 2 or 3?
It was near the school, the Weir School,
Oh,
Weir
it's
State School,
third.
the little school. It was
Yeah,
right
yeah.
beside the Weir.
Yeah,
Yeah. At the end
Right.
of the runway was pretty close to the school.
I was raised in Aikenville.
Oh, okay. Right.
And, yeah, that was the third weir.
Yeah. Yeah. I used to go, as a kid, I used to swim in one of the weirs. I couldn't swim. So it's a wonder I didn't drown actually. Yeah.
Thanks for the question, Gavin.
Yeah, thanks for your talk, Peter. I'm just interested in that camp that was at the end of Evans Road. Is that now where Salisbury is?
Probably. Yeah, I'm not sure. Oh, all I can tell you is it's above Muriel Avenue. Yeah. Do you remember where GEC used to be?
No.
Okay, on Bow Desert Road. So it's just west of Bow Desert Road, where Evans Road. And then you got
Oh, okay. So
Yeah,
it's on the western side?
western side of Bow
Right,
Desert
okay. I
Road.
thought from the photo it was on the eastern side,
No.
but
No,
yeah.
western side.
Are there any questions out in Zoom land?
What
Identify
happened to
yourself.
civil aviation during that period? If Eagle Farm shut down to relocate to Archerfield and then was revived again, what was civil aviation doing through those 5 years?
It was still operated from here. They did a lot of work for the military, of course, but it still did operate from Archfield. Yep. And after
Thanks.
the war, of course, the Commonwealth government looked at Eagle Farm and said, "Oh, geez, the Yanks have built up the level at Eagle Farm with a whole heap of gravel that they imported, and it's no longer a boggy place, and they've left all these nice hangars and igloos and buildings everywhere." So they moved the domestic airport for Brisbane back to Eagle Farm, and this became the secondary airfield for Brisbane.
Thanks.
Yes, another one from Darryl.
Yeah, it doesn't relate to the period, but in my research on the British nuclear trials and those Lincolns that flew through, well, they didn't fly through the cloud, they tracked the cloud and accidentally flew through it.
Oh, did they? Right.
As it transversed.
They shouldn't have.
Oh, no, they needed to too. They tracked it across Australia
Yeah.
on most of the blasts. But getting back to Amberley and quarantining those aircraft from the rest of the Lincoln fleet, I read reports that Lincolns came here in the big igloo hangars for deeper level maintenance. And I've got what I think are some photographs of the Lincolns
Oh, okay. Here.
in those
I've never seen.
hangars.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see
But I
those.
couldn't really, I had to make the assumption that the contaminated one stayed at Amberley, and you got a few of the regular
Yep.
Lincolns here for.
Yeah, I've never had
maintenance.
confirmation that there were contaminated ones here, but that was a story that was going around.
I can add a bit to this story. I have a cousin who was in the RAF at Townsville in about the early 60s, I suppose it was. And he told me that there were Lincolns up there which were contaminated, in inverted commas. Apparently they all kept away from them, except about once a week or two, they'd go aboard, just start them up and run for it just to keep them alive, and then shut them down again. But mostly kept away, but there were some hot Lincolns up in Townsville.
Yeah, the maritime Lincolns did participate, but the hottest ones were concentrated at Amberley, and they had a contamination centre there for those that, and they discovered that didn't
Were they-
really work. And
Were they long nose Lincolns or short nose?
I don't know.
Yeah,
got
ones
the
in
tail
ones in
numbers.
Townsville were long nose.
Yes, I've got the tail numbers, but they did operate from Sydney, Newcastle, Richmond, Williamtown, Amberley and Townsville, and points in between at different times, tracking the clouds.
Yep.
Across the country.
Peter, you would have been in Townsville, were you not, when the Lincolns were still there?
Yeah. I used to go out and take photos of them. Yep.
Yeah,
On my little trusty push bike.
I've been on board one, never
Yep.
never flew in one.
No, I went in one, but I never flew in one.
No.
But I saw them being dismantled out on Ingham Road there,
Yeah.
near where the old air depot was.
Yeah.
Yep. Many years later, before the Neptunes arrived. Then I saw the first Neptunes arrive as well in Townsville.
quite a
10
few
squadron.
Neptunes were dispersed around Australia at other airports to be used for firefighting practice too. I remember seeing one in Sydney.
Yep. Question over here.
Yes. Right.
Not so much a question, but I have a clear recollection of seeing the Lincolns in those hangars on the other side of
Oh, yeah.
Beatty Road in about 1955. And we
Right.
drove past there, we'd come up to the Eka.
Yep.
And it was at night. And those very large hangars that Thiest brothers were later using.
Yep.
In two of the hangars, in each hangar were two Lincolns, nose to tail down the centre of the hangar.
Yep.
And on either side of the hangar were rows of tiger moths,
Oh, yeah.
silver, not yellow, but
Yeah,
silver
yeah,
tiger
yeah.
moths. I've always wondered what the Lincolns were doing there. If they were surplus to requirements and they'd been moved from Amberley,
Yep.
why weren't they just scrapped, which they
Yeah.
were anyway later on?
Eventually, yeah.
And I've asked several people, no one's really been able to tell me why they were there.
I don't know if it was 3AD or the maintenance squadron, but I did find records that they had maintenance going on down here. And it was during the period after the blast. So I've made the assumption that they had to separate the fleet, keep them physically from getting equipment swapped between them and what have you, just more convenience for that depot, deeper level maintenance. And then, you know, the strip down rebuild, in my mind, it just made it logic that they would keep the good ones separate from the worst of the contaminated ones.
One thing I can tell you is that the ones that were contaminated, they painted a great big black cross on the side of the fuselage to identify them as they said, hot.
Okay. No.
On your visit, you entered through one of their hangars that was used to house one of those aircraft. I got a photograph with a black cross Lincoln battering the door down on that hangar.
The hangar doors.
Yeah. Was it you that gave me the photo? Yeah, all right. And the car park you parked in was where, until they built the contamination compound, that's where they parked the contaminated Lincolns where you parked. We have had the area checked and we're not hot.
That's good.
Yeah, I got some training on the Geiger counter.
Oh.
And then after training, they decided I wasn't to use it. I don't know whether
You're finding
yeah, I
too
might
many things.
find something that
More a statement going back into the Second World War. Here was actually the departure point for the 248th Fighter Group with 4 squadrons of the USAAF, which was Neil Kirby's group, 4 squadrons, P-47s. They were assembled at Eagle Farm. They flew here. And then the 4 squadrons completed their flight time, the minimum of 10 hours per pilot flight time around here to get used to the aircraft before they then departed from here in a ferry set up to New Guinea and at the various airfields around Port Moresby. So it was very, very busy here.
Very good idea to get more experience on the aircraft too.
Yeah.
Hello from Darryl Purdom.
Just one question, Peter. With the erection of aircraft, did you ever get numbers? How many aircraft were erected? I remember asking you this before, and
I
in
do
American
have some
records.
numbers, but I don't think it's very complete.
Yeah,
Yeah. And a lot happened at Amberley too, of course.
yeah. And the problem for us that it was Americans,
Yeah.
squad units doing the erection, and they
That's
kept
right.
their numbers.
Yeah.
So I don't have
Yep.
good numbers either.
So there was erection at Eagle Farm here and Amberley.
Yeah.
And Townsville as well. Quite a few aircraft erected in Townsville.
Oh, yeah,
Came in by ship, crated or wings missing and things like that. Yep. So here they arrived at Hamilton Wharves or Brett's Wharf, and they'd tow them up Nudgee Road, across the railway line, turn right, and straight into the airfield. They erected 100 P-47s at Eagle Farm. They might be the ones you're talking about.
Probably was.
Yeah, I've got a photo of them all lined up. And there's also a whole big line of P-38 Lightnings at Eagle Farm. And the Ford Motor Company were given the job to build a petrol tank, which drop tank in a big rush job for General Kenny, and that became known as the Brisbane tank.
They were different shape to the standard things.
Yeah, there's still a few of them around.
Parents ones are on the bottom, was only about 100 millimeters or
Yeah.
6 inches or so. Well, if you go 100 millimeters, that's
So-
4 inches, but very close.
So the old Ford,
So they made the Brisbane tank, which was flatter, to give more clearance and
Yeah.
and wider.
yeah, broad, yeah.
Very good.
So that the Ford Motor Company was right next door to Hangar 7 almost, at Eagle Farm. So they were very, very close, very handy.
Any more questions from people?
Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Peter.